Aloha. Welcome, everybody. Thanks for joining us. I know we're all still transitioning from this whole COVID stay at home, work from home, and then be with each other in person thing. So I really appreciate those that have been able to come join us. Of course, we do have an online engagement as well, although engagement's a strong word because all you can do online is listen and look. But yeah, thank you for joining us. And thank you to, I think we're about 40 or so folks online and growing. Thank you for joining us for day 2, actually, of Climate Week. It's the inaugural year of our Climate Week with a number of partners. We had a great day if you were able to be part of it yesterday all day. And then this is our opening of our Pacific Islands Climate Adaptation or PI-CASC Science Summit. And we have 2 fun-filled days of that today and tomorrow afternoon. I should tell you, for those that I don't know, certainly, my name is Darren Lerner, and I serve as the consortium director for PI-CASC, as well as our director here on the University of Hawaii campus for our Sea Grant College program. And before we dig into things, and I'll make some introductions, I just want to share with you the work that we are all sharing today is only possible because of the amazing people and incredible places found here in the islands of Hawaii. And I know we have folks here, of course, from our islands, but if you don't know, we have a lot of visitors as well, both from Alaska and from all over the country associated with our National Climate Adaptation Science Center. So before we begin the talks and open the Science Summit, we would like to offer this land acknowledgement that recognizes Hawaii as an indigenous space whose original people are today identified as Native Hawaiians. This may come as a surprise, but I'm not Native Hawaiian. I'm a settler on this Aina who now calls the island of Oahu the Moku or district of Ko'olaupoko and the Ahupua'a of Kahalu'u, my home. The place that we are presenting from is here on the island of Oahu in the Moku of Kona in the Ahupua'a of Waikiki. You're here in Manoa Valley and welcome. We further recognize that generations of indigenous Hawaiians and their knowledge systems demonstrated practices of sustainability, resilience, and adaptation that continue to shape this Aina in ways that allow us to enjoy her gifts today. For this, we are truly grateful. So that was one of the most important things I could have said to all of you standing up here, as far as I'm concerned. You may think also that these next housekeeping items are important, and they are. So the program, including the agenda and information on all our speakers for today and tomorrow, I hope you'll be able to join us tomorrow as well, is available through a QR code that might be on the screen at some point. Rachel's saying nope, but it's around the room on the tables, and it was outside when you first walked in. Yeah, and also we have coffee and iced tea and water. They're all available right over there near the entrance to the room. We will have a break at 2:30, but please, you're all welcome at any point in time. Get up, grab yourself something to drink. We purposely had it in the room so that you can stay with us while you're doing that. And then, of course, if you are having some coffee and things, you might need the restrooms, which are out the door, down the stairs, to the left, and then you can actually go left or right. There's a bunch of them. All right. So as you're going to learn here in a second, if you're not familiar, as I introduce myself, I'm the consortium director. So there's some other components to this thing we call PI-CASC, and it's my pleasure and privilege to introduce the federal director of PI-CASC, Dr. Mary Vaughn Johnson. Dr. Mary Vaughn was previously an agronomist with the U.S. Department of Agriculture's Natural Resources Conservation Service in Temple, Texas. She brings a systems-oriented perspective informed by her experiences in international diplomacy, multifunctional land use solutions, and policy impact assessments. Dr. Johnson originally trained in plant ecology and wildlife sciences, earning an MS in a master's in environmental and plant biology at Ohio University, and later a PhD in wildlife science at Texas A&M University. Between degrees, she volunteered as an intern with the USGS Biological Resource Division Palila Restoration Project on Hawaii Island, conducting floristic surveys of invasive, endemic, and naturalized species. In 2010, Mary Vaughn became a AAAS fellow and put this team building strategy into effect by working with the US State Department and leading the Lower Mekong Initiative and creating the Friends of the Lower Mekong. In this position, she formed multilateral relationships across multiple disciplines, coordinating between the federal agency, foreign governments, domestic and foreign academic institutions, multinational foundations, all with the goal of bringing science to policy more effectively. The experience also helped to hone her ability to work with diverse interests and negotiate cross-discipline solutions. Mary Vaughn also provided scientific expertise to inform the Great Lakes Water Quality Agreement, an international agreement between the US and Canada. Her most recent position at the USDA focused on the Conservation Effects Assessment Project, providing leadership and direction and funding of research related to wildlife, wetlands, and agriculture conservation practices by developing collaborative science portfolios that address concerns related to sustainable agriculture production systems and water quality at regional and national scales. Now, when Mary Vaughn was hired to take over as the federal director of PI-CASC, she was hired to work with us and to be here on the island of Oahu, but clearly her experience on Hawaii Island and its beauty drew her to a point where she could not refuse. So Mary Vaughn does now live on Hawaii Island, and I welcome her to this stage and back to this island. Thank you.
Aloha. This is quite the introduction, Darren. I would like to introduce myself again. I'm Mary Vaughn, and I live on Moku Okeawe, which you may know as Hawaii Island. And as Darren said, I did serve as a USGS intern here decades, literally ago. And when I was here, I realized that for me, this place wasn't a vacation. For me, this place spoke to me. And I hope that as you are here, that some of you will start to develop these relationships, or you've already developed these relationships and these islands have called you and kept you here. I think that as you speak with the people in this room and the people who are online speaking to the people in your virtual rooms, you will find a level of commitment that I have found that is unsurpassed with any of the groups that I've ever worked with across the continent or internationally. The people that form the community here are people who are committed to finding the sustainable solutions to climate adaptation. And when they say sustainable, they actually use that word with its true meaning, which means something that we can keep doing in perpetuity, not something that will last 5 years or 10 years. Because people have long-term relationships that are ancestor-based, that are place-based, that are their future, with their relationship with their children, that they want to be able to continue to commit their resources to continuing these islands and the services that they provide, because those services are really a relationship with the land and with the sea here. Sorry, my introduction got me off topic, because I think of myself as the things that Darren said, but I also think of myself in the context of these islands in a different situation rather than purely as a scientist. So let me step back to the program, and I will tell you again, welcome and thank you for being here. I really appreciate all of those who have come here to present. I appreciate all of those who have come to communicate and to share your ideas and your thoughts. The hope with this program is that we will create a forum by which we can share our concerns around climate change, while we can share the lessons that we have learned around climate change adaptation, where we can talk about the management needs, the management unknowns, the places where we really are lacking some level of engagement, where you think that we could find a leverage point where we could change the trajectory in a positive fashion for these islands in relation to climate change adaptation. I would also like to recognize the fact that the Pacific Islands are leaders. As I said in my informal introduction just a moment ago. We are leaders. We are leaders both in terms of experiencing climate change's impacts, but we also are flagships in terms of people looking towards us to understand how are we dealing with the challenges that the rest of the world is facing as well, because they're thinking that they're facing these challenges on a longer timeline, that they have time to be able to learn from what we've done and to be able to apply it where they are. And so to that point, I would say all of the other CASCs, the Climate Adaptation Science Centers, have directors who have come here to witness our conversation that we're having here. Thank you to the CASC directors who are here. Thank you to the National CASC Director, Doug, who has joined us today to learn from this room and from the people who are participating in this event. I would also like to recognize that many of the people in this room are partners with PI-CASC, but you may not think of yourselves as partners with PI-CASC, because we together through PI-CASC and through the other organizations that have come together to put together Climate Week, we are creating a larger hui, or some of you may even think of it as an ohana, of people that come together that are committed to finding these solutions together. Those include people from UHM, from UHH, from the University of Guam, from various nonprofits, from other interagency within the federal government, the state government, the county government. And so I thank you all, not just for your commitment being here today, but for your commitment in the endeavors that we are seeking to improve and address together. I would also like to formally thank the other people who have committed their time to developing Climate Week. Yesterday was a fabulous event, and the rest of the week promises to be comparably exciting. That includes Hawaii Sea Grant, Hawaii Climate Change Mitigation and Adaptation Commission, the Pacific RISA, the East-West Center hosting us here, the USF Forest Service, and the Better Tomorrow Speaker Series. I would also like to thank all of the speakers who have taken their time, many of whom who traveled great distances to be able to share their lessons learned and their ideas for the solutions for tomorrow. And I would like to thank the students and the youth who are engaging today. I think that this is a great opportunity to be able to learn from them for those of us who are, like I said, a couple decades into our career, to be reminded by the fact that there are fresh eyes and fresh voices that do have insights that they can share. And I think that that's about where we are. I guess, Darren, you didn't really give us a background of what the CASCs are. Those of you who aren't familiar with what the CASCs are, the reason that Darren and I are communicating here is that the Climate Adaptation Science Centers are a unique relationship that the federal government has formed with the university systems across the country. And that unique relationship is through an agreement, we enter into a 5-year relationship with the university systems. And then we are able to develop programs that speak to undergraduate students, to graduate students, to postdoctoral students, and that interface with researchers, both within the federal government and within the academic world. So it's a really unique opportunity to be able to bring worlds together that otherwise academia and the federal government often sort of struggles to be able to marry. So with that, I think that I will move us along in the agenda as we move towards understanding the needs and highlighting the cooperative efforts to support sustainability and climate adaptation in these islands and beyond. And I believe I'm handing this to Brad. Brad, I do not have a fabulous introduction for you, but this is Brad Romine, and he really is much of the mind behind the entire week. And I think that we all owe him a round of applause for fabulous.
Okay, aloha everybody. I am Brad Romine. I'm the Deputy Director of the University Consortium of the Pacific Islands Climate Adaptation Science Center, or PI-CASC. I'm here real briefly. I'll just go through our agenda. Again, that agenda and the program with all the bios and talk information is available online. The QR codes back of the room there. Just scan that with your phone and pull up the agenda. Today we'll start, we had our opening, we're going to have a series of research presentations, and then we have a keynote talk first, can't forget that, and we'll get to that in a minute. But then we have a series of research presentations and a couple of great panel discussions, all focused around our first of 3 themes today. And that first theme is drought and wildfire science. Tomorrow, Wednesday, we'll get into first integrated watershed science as our second theme, and followed by our third theme, which is sea level rise adaptation science. So with that, I would like to introduce and welcome to the stage Dr. Alyssa Anderson, who will be introducing our keynote speaker for this section. We'll also be moderating one of our discussions and also giving a talk. So we're very pleased to have Alyssa here to help. Alyssa is a postdoctoral fellow with PI-CASC, located here at University of Hawaii at Manoa. She graduated from the University of Hawaii at Manoa School of Ocean and Earth Science and Technology, where she is now, as I mentioned, a postdoctoral fellow researching climate and fire in the Hawaiian Islands. She has taught earth science classes through Hawaiian language immersion instruction, at Windward Community College, and previously worked on the Kahua A'o project, translating Hawaiian language newspaper for science research and education. Alyssa, welcome to the stage, and Alyssa will be introducing our keynote speaker. Thank you, Alyssa.
Thank you, Brad, for the introduction. Aloha, we're honored today to welcome our keynote speaker, who will present on adaptation science to address drought and wildfire threats in Hawaii and the Pacific. Our speaker is the co-executive director of Hawaiʻi Wildfire Management Organization, where she began working in 2008. She works with staff and partners across Hawaii and the Western Pacific to implement wildfire mitigation, planning, and education projects with the goals of improving wildfire readiness and resilience. She's also the vice president of the Big Island Wildfire Coordinating Group and co-founded the Pacific Fire Exchange. Let us now acknowledge the magnitude of her contributions, and please welcome Elizabeth Pickett.
Right, good afternoon. I want to start off just by thanking everybody for gathering and for including wildfire in Climate Week. Wildfire is often left off the radar in some of our hazard mitigation planning efforts across the state and region. It's just really exciting and thrilling to see that it's included in something as important and thoughtful as this week of activities. So thank you for including wildfire, and thank you for inviting me to be a part of this. I'm honored to be here. So again, my name is Elizabeth Pickett. I'm co-executive director of Hawaiʻi Wildfire Management Organization, and I'll talk a little bit about the organization in a minute, but I wanted to start off by just sharing that I thought long and hard about how to present wildfire as the start of this session, to sort of frame it up. And I realized that maybe a zoom out approach would be necessary, because when it comes to wildfire, there are so many parts and pieces and partnerships going on that affect long-term wildfire outcomes and even immediate outcomes. And it was hard for me to pick a piece to focus on. So instead I've zoomed out. But of course we can start with just talking about fire in general and wildfire on the landscape. And I'll start off by just pointing out some of our large fires that have happened. So in 2018, and our large fires go back in history, but I'm going to start off with 2018 because this was a real eye-opening year for a lot of people when it came to wildfire. And it helped us turn the corner on awareness and preparedness to just have this series of events happen. But in 2018, Hurricane Hector passed by, dropped our relative humidity pretty low. And then Hurricane Lane followed that. And just, if you remember, it was Category 5 and just barely scratched by us. But in the days preceding Hurricane Lane arriving, we had unprecedented dry conditions. It was at the end of a long dry out period for a lot of our vegetation on the ground. And we had 4 record-setting fires on 3 islands happening at the very same exact time, same day, same conditions across the state, maxing out our emergency management professionals. And so I just wanted to show that during that time, we lost 30 homes and structures in West Maui. Makaha and Waianae valleys and area were also burning, record-setting multiple valleys, emergency responders working their hardest to address this sort of unprecedented fire occurrence. And it threatened lives and homes, it burned farms, it burned forests. And at the same exact time, we had 16,000 acres burning in Waikoloa on Hawaii Island. And in addition to that, on Hawaii Island, we had the Keauhou fire burning in Volcanoes National Park. And these are all on the same exact days because of the conditions that we are facing.
And this is important to acknowledge, but then I thought through, okay, well, in addition to this, we had fires in South Point, we had Hamakua fires, more Maui fires all throughout. So these are just some of the big fires that happened that year, but these aren't the only fires. You know, we have thousands of fires every year that require a fire suppression response, and they don't always get this big, but they're happening all the time on all sides of all islands throughout the state. So then in 2019, moving forward, we had, even in legislative documents, Maui County called it the year of fire because 25,000 acres burned. And then there's a typo, this should say 2021, but we had the Mana Road fire on Hawaiʻi Island in 2021. 40,000 acres burned, one of the biggest in state history. This was a very complex fire. We had fire burning in 3 directions at once, county, state, and federal. Fire and forestry professionals dealing with this, contractors, aerial operations. It was a really big deal. We've learned a lot of lessons from this. And one of them is we better start getting ready for bigger multi-day, multi-agency fires. But then, you know, we keep going and we have, you know, recent fire, 20,000 acres, the Leilani fire also on Hawaiʻi Island. And again, these are not the only fires. These are just some that I chose to highlight. So when we think about this, we know we have fire risk. We know we are fire prone. This is predictable. These are not one-offs. This is not random. The grass doesn't just grow back, no big deal. This is heavily impacting. And so we have an issue. You know, we have a fire problem and Hawaii and Pacific Island areas are burning. I think my slide conversion to PowerPoint cut off some words, so you'll have to excuse that, but we're burning. Our lands are burning. And it's because of people and the expansion of grassland, fire-prone savannas. And that problem is increasing. We're seeing more fires. They're larger, they're more frequent, and they're moving into areas that as we burn, the grass burns into the edge of the forest. That forest with repeated burns is converted into more grassland. We have the grass fire cycle, expanding the area that is at risk and fire prone, increasing our risk and increasing our fire occurrence and impact. So that said, we know the drivers behind fire. We know a lot. In the early days, we didn't know so much. And it's been decades of developing this information and really mapping out the trends and patterns to understand what's going on. But we know now, and we know that 99% of fires are human caused. Less than 1% are lava and lightning. They do occur, but it's primarily a human issue. And for this, you know, we're working hard on outreach, education, awareness, preparedness, risk reduction. And we also know that it's because where those human activities and our human day-to-day choices have not caught up with the risk that we actually face, we have, you know, fuels nearby that are dry, unmanaged, and dense and very fire prone. And so where those two things come together, we have a recipe for wildfire. And on the fuel side, we have to do things like fuels management, cross-boundary coordination, really looking at the landscape level to reduce where fire can even go if it starts to burn. And the impacts are broad, long-lasting, wide-ranging. Everything from summit to sea is impacted. We lose upland forests. We see conversion of grasslands. We have downstream impacts as we see post-fire erosion, cause sediment pollution in our nearshore waters, smothering coral reefs, impacting recreation, fisheries, water quality. We have impacts to our air quality. So during fire smoke, after fire dust. This is really an issue that affects land, water, and air, and communities and natural resources. On the community side, we have municipal infrastructure at risk, lives and home, firefighter lives and safety. This is a broad issue that requires widespread collective action towards solutions. And just on the forest side of things, you know, a lot of us are motivated by our natural landscape and thinking through what a dryland forest looks like and what it looks like after it's been converted after multiple fires is enough of a motivator. But we also work a lot in the public sphere and in the community side of things because people care a lot about their neighborhoods and their house and home and family. And together, this is, you know, the picture that we're working on. And this is not unique just to Hawaii. Across the Pacific Islands area, the issues are very similar. We have human-caused ignitions in landscapes where fire is novel, in part because of invasive species, because of conversion into grass savannas because of human ignitions. There's also post-fire erosion. So this is not just Hawaii that I'm talking about. It expands to include the Pacific Islands area. And a lot of what I've presented so far are sort of the biophysical parts of fire: flames, damage, natural resource impacts. But the part I want to focus on for a lot of the rest of the talk is that if this is a human issue or a human-driven problem, what are we doing about human-driven solutions? And this is the exciting part, the hopeful part, the part that gets me really enthusiastic about the work that I've been able to be a part of. And that's really that working together across boundaries, across jurisdictions, proactively is really where it's at. And we have some people to thank for that. And I just wanted to take a moment to honor two mentors, to some of us in the room, who really set the trajectory in an amazing and awesome direction for all of us to build on over time. So Wayne Ching and Miles Nakahara both work for Division of Forestry and Wildlife. Many of you may have known them. They both passed away within weeks of each other in 2020, but I wish they could see the fruits of their efforts. I mean, not only were they expert wildlife biologists and fire incident commanders and managers, but they also set a trajectory and mechanisms for the social side of progress. You know, there's that adage that in Hawaii, progress only moves at the speed of trust. And I think these guys really understood that. And they knew it was a long game and that we had to build relationships. We had to be willing to go slow and not just run ahead, because you end up there by yourself if you run ahead, but rather we work together, and they set up mechanisms and coordinating groups to make this possible. And that's a lot of the work that we collectively have been carrying out in that same trajectory. So that I wanted to give them their due credit and sort of celebrate with like-minded people that these guys really started something special. And if you were lucky enough to know them, I think you'd probably agree. And so in that sense, you know, they drilled it into many of us that if science wasn't practitioner driven and co-developed and co-implemented and co-disseminated, it probably wasn't going to be used. It wasn't going to be practical or relevant. And they created mechanisms for communication and sharing and coordination among fire agencies and beyond. And they understood that wildfire really needed to address communities and natural resources in an interwoven way. So I wanted to give them a shout out and explain that that is really the platform upon all the rest of this work that I present is laying upon. So one of the main things they did that I'm a part of is that they co-founded the Hawaiʻi Wildfire Management Organization, which is a nonprofit. And we've carried forward their approach in all the work that we do. And we started off on the west side of Hawaii Island and went island-wide, statewide, Pacific-wide. And we continue to be the hub of all things wildfire except for suppression. So we do education, planning, mitigation, and more. We have a conventional nonprofit board. We have staff who implement projects, and we have technical advisors that guide our work plan, make sure that our work is relevant, that it is based on what's needed on the ground, that we're filling gaps within agencies, and they provide technical expertise on our projects. So we really try to gather up the best of what there is and move forward together. And because of that, the organization is 23 years old. And because of the slow work of building relationships and building collaborative projects and plans, we have this robust set of partnerships, fire plans, and communication mechanisms in place. It's interesting to call them communication mechanisms because at this point we're all friends and we're texting and emailing and calling and showing up at all the same things, doing things together. It's very natural, but it was built slowly over time, methodically, strategically, and very thoughtfully to make sure that relationships were always mattering more than one grant opportunity or one particular project, but rather that we were just maintaining that trust throughout the whole process. And at this point, there are a lot of people working together on wildfire solutions. We don't always have the capacity or the money to get big things done, but there are people who are informed and aware and not just engaged, but giving their volunteer time and their professional hours toward wildfire solutions. And this is really exciting. That said, our networks and all this collaboration is not just limited to Hawaii or to Pacific Island areas, but actually extends to the mainland. So programs that are going on the continent and in North America also exist in Hawaii. And with Division of Forestry and Wildlife, Hawaiʻi Wildfire Management is hosting and coordinating and leading those in Hawaii. So our FireWise Communities program is part of the National FireWise Communities program. This is a neighborhood risk reduction program where neighbors and community members can come together to self-identify their biggest wildfire hazards and work together to put in hours and time towards solutions and risk reduction measures. And they are linked in across Hawaii. There are 18 communities and it's growing. And they are linked to each other through quarterly get-togethers and lessons learned. And then they're linked in with the national group of FireWise communities. You can see Hawaii is literally on the map for these national efforts because we're an important part of the solution. And similarly, the International Association of Fire Chiefs has their community, the main community preparedness and evacuation readiness program for the US. And Hawaii has a Hawaii-specific Ready, Set, Go set of preparedness materials and programming going on that's instituted by Division of Forestry and Wildlife, our county fire departments, and Hawaiʻi Wildfire Management. So we are well connected with all of what's going on the mainland. And similarly, it was already mentioned, but we might not have the capacity. We have a lot of work to do in a lot of realms to get ourselves all the way up to fire prepared and wildfire resilient. However, what we do have going on that's special is the level of communication and collaboration and co-implemented projects in Hawaii. And because of that, we are on the leading edge of that. And we are part of the Fire Adapted Communities Learning Network as a core member who reaches out through publications and trainings and workshops to share those lessons learned with tens of thousands of other practitioners across the US who want to start incorporating more real life, long-term, multi-generational trust building and network building toward community action and adaptation and resilience. So it's pretty exciting. So we have a lot of work to do. We have a lot to learn, but on the community and the collaborative side of things, we are able to set a lot of the tone for what's happening in the US with our partners at Fire Adapted, the Fire Adapted Communities Learning Network. So that said, I'm just going to roll through a lot of what is going on already that Hawaiʻi Wildfire is leading or co-leading on behalf of our many partners. The first is just to say that when we're out and about, we frequently have to myth bust because the first step to getting to wildfire awareness and then action starts with making sure people know that the fire department isn't going to do everything related to everything fire. They fight fires. And so if that idea that there is a role for everyone to play and it's not just the fire department is kind of an essential first step. And once we get past that, we can go on and explain and talk about how Hawaii has adapted the National Cohesive Wildland Fire Management Strategy that's been set forth at the national level to identify and emphasize that it takes work in all these areas in order to improve fire outcomes and move the needle and start moving toward where we really need to be in terms of managing fire and increasing our safety protection of communities and natural resources. So the first part of that Venn diagram is really fire adapted communities. What are all the things we need to do to get to where we have caught up with our real fire risk? That includes zoning, planning, ordinance, infrastructure, home ignition zones, fire safe communities, budgets. There's a lot of things for humans and the built environment to have going on to really be in a safe and resilient fire adapted place. Another piece is resilient landscapes, which I think a lot of folks are familiar with, but we want to get to a place where our landscapes can resist fire, survive fire, and recover after fire, and that they're resilient to disease and disturbance and other things that put pressure and make it even more of a fire-prone landscape. And then, of course, we want to optimize our firefighting. We want fires to be caught early, kept small, and as minimally damaging as possible. And for that, we need equipment, training, water resources, access, all sorts of things to optimize our firefighting. And of course, in every one of these realms, we need the best available information and science to inform it. And there's a lot of work to do to fill in all those gaps for Hawaii. That said, the Fire Adapted Communities Network came out with a graphic to sort of illustrate all the people and professions and communities of practice that need to be involved in creating the landscape and the built environment and the firefighting and the community awareness pieces. And with our technical advisors, we dove in deeper and said, what's all needed in Hawaii? Who is everyone we need to be partnering with? And instead of just producing a bunch of fact sheets and saying, okay, all these people need to do this, we actually have invested a lot of time and energy into getting to know people in each of these realms. And those are the producers of information, teachers, K through 8, academicians, the media, stewards of the land, landscapes and lands and waters, for everything from farmers and ranchers to natural resource managers and foresters. Also decision makers, community leaders, people who put in place policy, ordinance, budgets, et cetera. And then our folks who impact safety. And that's everything from utility companies and insurance companies to our emergency responders and others who help us to be safe. I forgot the planners and architects, engineers. I think I said that earlier, but that's part of what creates whether our built environments are safe or not. So that said, we just have a lot of conventional stuff available too, if you ever want it. We have our more conventional outreach and preparedness information, KQ materials, K through 8 curriculum, all the regular conventional stuff for community events and assemblies and things like that. We have the Firewise Communities Program, which is really powerful. So all of that is available for more information through Division of Forestry and Wildlife or Hawaiʻi Wildfire Management. The exciting piece of this year is that we have trained up fire department personnel and community leaders from the Firewise program to conduct hundreds of home assessments to reduce risk in the home ignition zone for community members. And this is really cool. It's the first time, at least here in Hawaii, that we've had our fire prevention personnel and our community leaders getting certified in the same trainings and going out and multiplying the workforce that we have to get some of this work done. There are lots of multi-partner plans that were, again, co-developed based on best information that we had. We learned together, we worked together, we created action plans together, and now they're being implemented at all kinds of scales, the neighborhood scale, local scale, regional, countywide, et cetera. And there are hazard assessments that have been done for every developed area. We have people working on the natural areas. And we've driven every road in the state to look at 36 different hazard characteristics that contribute to fire. So every neighborhood has its own assessment. And we're working on something similar in Guam and Palau in terms of multi-partner planning and hazard assessments. So this isn't just in Hawaii, but this kind of multi-partner information-based co-development of plans and actions is really starting to spread throughout the region. We have some model pilot fire plan templates, and we just produced and published our first one that actually focuses on communities, natural resource managers, and firefighters for the before, during, and after parts of fire incidents and what everyone can do so that they can be better integrated with each other. And in terms of fuels management, we've done a lot of heavy lifting in terms of mapping out what fuels management is happening and where to go next with it, with lots of workshops to co-prioritize where do we go next with limited capacity. And it's happening. So in lots of these places, these coordinating groups they were part of the process, and now they've shaped up and they're running with it. And so this is just a picture of a group in Waianae that has farmers and teachers, Division of Forestry and Wildlife, Hawaiian Electric, lots of folks coming together to figure out how to do education and fuels management in their area. And we're having these types of groups start to form and take action all across the state. So sort of in summary, almost in summary, there's all kinds of groups, and these are people. And this isn't just happenstance. This was strategic. This was methodical. There are social science techniques going on in here. We're using facilitative leadership, asset-based community development, participant action research. There are real methods that can be learned to do what Wayne and Miles did intuitively, which was to build trust, to find out where the overlap is, work in that overlap area so lots of people can be engaged. These are methods that can be continued by lots of people. So we're excited to be understanding what happens with that. We also have project-based groups going on. There are a lot of people working on fire. And one exciting piece is that we have all of our agencies, county, state, and federal, prevention staff and education staff are getting together every 1 or 2 months. And now finally, we're not talking about firefighting. our fire agencies are actually co-developing consistent messaging and tools to use for mitigation, planning, and education. And that's new, and that's really exciting. And then finally, we've done the same method where we've learned as much as we can from partners throughout the Pacific Islands area. We've done a needs assessment, we've built relationships along the way, and we just launched a Pacific Islands area wildfire learning and action network. And over time, we'll be coordinating projects, we'll be bringing in guest speakers and pursuing fire science based on what the network wants to see happen. And with that, I'll just share that, we co-lead the Pacific Fire Exchange with University of Hawaii and guided by many advisors on the day-to-day. So some of our staff are busy working on the Pacific Fire Exchange science and products, but Dr. Clay Trauernicht is going to talk very specifically about that. So I'll save it for him. And then I just want to leave us with a vision. So what does it look like when all these parts are happening concurrently and we're really doing all the parts that we need to do, and it's all informed by science? It looks like we are managing our pre-fire hazards, we're reducing ignitions, we're managing our fuels. It looks like we are diminishing impacts to our natural resources. It means that during suppression, we are safe, we are effective, we are efficient in protecting both community and natural resources. After fire, we are recovering, rehabilitating, and restoring and stabilizing soil and all the things we need to do to mitigate those post-fire impacts. And we're including all of those parts that need to come together, including ordinances, zoning, planning, consistent messaging, outreach and education, forest management plans, all of the different things that I've mentioned along the way. They're all happening. Everybody knows their role. Everybody's doing their part, and wildfire is integrated into the work that we're each doing as professionals and within our communities of practice. And finally, it looks like we're doing it together, and we're doing it for the long term, and we're not operating in silos. We don't have to run ahead to prove ourselves. This isn't an ego thing. This is a together thing, and it's happening. And so in terms of adaptation and resilience, there's a lot we can talk about that's conceptual, that's research-based, whatever else. But in our day-to-day at Hawaiʻi Wildfire Management, we're making eye contact and seeing resilience every day. And we're seeing people form friendships and people knowing each other, knowing who to call, community members knowing the fire department knowing each other. It's just really cool to see what that looks like in action, because those of us who are interested in adaptation and resilience, they're like these buzzwords and they're conceptual, but it looks like trust, it looks like respect, it looks like commitment and passion. And if only we had that money and capacity, we could run wild with this, but we're getting there. And I'm excited to be a part of it. And I just want to thank our funders who believe in this kind of work and have funded us along the way to do all this, to start to contribute to the solutions. So with that, I'm finished. I can take questions.
Thank you very much, Elizabeth. Really enjoyed your talk. We do have time for some questions. Beth and I will have mics and we'll run around with those. Just raise your hands. We'll hand you a mic. You got a question?
Thank you for that great talk. That was wonderful and inspiring. About the non-native grasses, can you say a little bit about what the difference between the non-native and the native grasses is, and why the non-native grasses are more prone to fire than the, I mean, at least that's what I inferred.
Sort of, yeah. I mean, I should probably let Clay answer that when he does his talk, specifically about grass. But we don't have a lot of native grasses. It's more like forest. And as the fire burns into the forest, our native ecosystems are not fire adapted. The seed bank burns, they grow slow. They just can't outcompete these invasive grasses that then spread into those areas and take over.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Oh, this is similar to that last question, but, and I'm sure you might get into it in a little bit, but what does a fire resilient natural ecosystem look like?
Well, the way it's described, and I think Hawaii has such diverse ecosystems that the specifics might look different in each area. But really it's one that can I mentioned it, but it can resist fire in the first place. So we're preventing fire from getting in, and it's healthy enough, it's hydrated enough that it's not carrying fire, and it can withstand fire that does come through. We're not burning through the whole seed bank. We have regeneration after, and that it can recover after it. Basically a landscape that can tolerate fire coming nearby or through it without totally being devastated.
Hi, I'm very interested in your equivalence with resiliency and trust. And I was here yesterday and covered the campfire aftermaths. And yesterday's announcement that the state is providing a seed fund for climate adaptation, I saw today was met in the newspaper with, when I looked, near 100 comments that were very cynical. And at campfire, I saw the aftermath with victims totally burned out, unwilling to let the federal government on their land and sign over any access for fear that the government might take it. And having family on the Big Island, I understand the level of ease of gaining trust in the smaller rural communities. But what have you seen and what might you have done in Honolulu, for example, where the urban mentality is sort of embattled at this point in our political and social history? Thanks.
It's a really good question. It is, I actually find it easier in the rural areas. I think there's a long history of working together to take care of things because you're so removed from services. So there's a longer history of communal action. Although I will say Kamilo Nui Mariners Cove is one of our Firewise communities, and it's developed there, you know, but they are adjacent to wildland areas. And so a starting point is when a community of any type has been scared before, they're a lot more willing to take action. And then when those mechanisms are in place for them to actually meet their firefighters, their first responders, their natural resource managers, you start to unpack the story. And so then there's less of an expectation. Well, why didn't the fire department just only focus on my farm or my house or my neighborhood? They start to understand that they're capacity limited. And so as those conversations start to grow and the different perspectives are revealed, we've seen it be pretty much on the same trajectory as building trust when those opportunities are provided. But in places like, in the campfire and other places on the mainland, our partners have communicated pretty strongly that that expectation that fire is something someone else is supposed to protect them from is so deeply ingrained that it's going to take a long time before we move to that. There's a role for everyone. You're responsible for your own home and yard. Actually get engaged with your community. You're responsible for the communal areas and the areas beyond. And maybe those landowners next door who you're complaining aren't managing their fuels, maybe they don't have the capacity, and we could work together to get them to meet code and manage those adjacent boundaries. And so it's a long game. And in my early career, I was so frustrated because I just wanted everything to happen so fast. And I realized, thanks to Miles saying, slow down, they're at the table. That's new for the last couple of decades. And it's like, okay. And so it's like those conversations, that eye contact, those perspectives being shared, and somebody to coordinate that happening, who's committed and can carry that forward over time to make sure that you get there. I think those are, probably general answers, but that's sort of how we operate in those ways.
Thank you. I think we have time for one more question if there is one. Anybody?
What about engagement with insurance companies?
It's like the $1 million question. So we've tried, and until we can prove that enough homes have been lost and enough lives have been lost, a lot of insurance companies have not expressed interest in Hawaii or the Pacific yet. So our Firewise Communities program is one of the few in the nation that don't actually have insurance reductions for homeowners insurance because they're in a nationally recognized Firewise community. So it's one of those things that we're working on it, but it's an important piece. We've gotten some State Farm grants and little bits here and there, but that there's a huge role for insurance companies to play in Hawaii, and we're not there yet.
Great. All right. One more round of applause for Elizabeth.
Okay,
thank you very much. Mahalo, Elizabeth.